Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Voices in Action, a podcast by Eastern Oregon Center for Independent Living. And before we begin, as always, please listen to the following important public service announcement from the late and Honorable Judy Heumann. Judy is the former United States Assistant Secretary of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services in the Clinton administration and the former U.S. State Department Special Advisor for International Disability Rights in the Obama administration. Recently, Judy starred in the Netflix documentary Crip Camp.
Hello, my name is Judy Heumann. I'm here today to encourage you to please take your COVID vaccine. And if you have friends and family that haven't, please encourage them also. COVID is to be taken seriously. In addition to taking the vaccine, please use other protective methods. Wear a mask, use gloves, and sanitize frequently. If you need additional information, and you live in Eastern Oregon, you can contact EOCIL. Thank you, and protect yourselves and the community.
Welcome, everyone, to Voices in Action, a podcast brought to you by Eastern Oregon Center for Independent Living, a global disability resource and advocacy center, where here we dive deep into the lived experiences of many individuals at the heart of policymaking, substance use, LGBTQI+ advocacy and support, and so much more. In each episode, where we'll explore personal stories from individuals that shed light on real-world impacts and how they shape the lives of those in our community. Join us as we get insights from those who've walked the path and are making strides. So stay tuned as we unravel the threads of policy and personal journey and discover how EOCIL is making a difference in the lives of people, one story at a time. Welcome, everyone, to Voices in Action, a podcast brought to you by Eastern Oregon Center for Independent Living. Today, I'm meeting with Raquel Reyes with Poder of Idaho to talk about her position in the organization, the work that they do, and who they're intended to help. I met a few of their workers during an outreach event here in Ontario, Oregon, and through their two personnel through their organization, I was able to learn a lot of great information just at the table. So I figured, why not reach out and find someone to come sit down with me for about an hour to talk about the services and programs that they offer. Raquel, thank you so much for sparing your time to come here with me and have a conversation about, some of the work that you guys do. If you'd like to give a self-introduction to the people, please.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us. I really appreciate the invite and an opportunity to talk about Poder of Idaho. My name is Raquel. As you mentioned, I am the Director of Programs and Operations for Poder of Idaho. I started out as a board member, and as the organization started to grow, I came on as an independent contractor to help the organization with programs and admin work in the office. So Poder of Idaho we mobilize and organize the Latino community and educate our Latino community with legislative processes and bills that are being introduced in our legislation that affects our undocumented community and our Latino community overall. Our goal is to fight for immigrant rights. And so when anti-immigrant bills come up, then we mobilize our community to either write a letter, sign a petition, come in and testify to our legislation saying we are against this bill that you're trying to introduce to Idaho that affects our community. We also do voter registration. We work on education, immigration, gender equity, finances. We provide all kinds of information to our community via conferences, via charlas, via workshops, trainings, or just presentations.
Okay, that's wonderful. And that's a good amount of work you guys are doing, especially with the current times that's currently going on. A lot of work that is needed and absolutely appreciated. Before we get into a little bit more in depth about the specific programs you guys have to offer, I was wondering if you would share a little bit about your history, about where you come from, and if possible, maybe this was something that you were looking for in your community, that would have helped you then that wasn't offered, and vice versa. So where did you grow up, or in what area?
Yeah, so I am the abuela of the organization, the matriarch of the organization. So I work with with all Gen Zers and millennials, and I am a boomer. So with that being said, I was raised in Wilder, Idaho, but I was born in Los Angeles, California. My parents brought me here when I was like 3 years old, so I see Idaho as my home state. My parents were immigrants and they were farm workers for many years up until like 1953 when they settled in Wilder. I have always been an activist and an advocacy work and an activist because my father was very well known in our very small ag community because the Latinos that came in were seasonal, right? And so many didn't know or have enough resources or information. And because my dad was a minister in a church in Wilder, they would look for him for assistance. So my dad would take his 4 girls, I have 3 older sisters, and volunteered our assistance to the community with these families. And so we've been around for many, many years. I've been doing this work for very many years. I worked for the Community Council of Idaho. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're located in Caldwell. They've been established since like 1974. And I worked for them for about 15 years doing advocacy work. And then I founded an immigration program for them about 4 years ago. So this is not new to me. The sad thing to report here on this podcast is that we're fighting the same battles that I've been fighting for the past 40 plus years, right? Because I'm getting ready to retire, so that'll tell you a lot. But yes, I've been doing this work for quite some time. My parents, like I said, were ministers and they had their own church, and it was a bilingual church, and it was the only one of its kind in the area. And so we've always been involved with the community. My parents, I've always been involved with the community. This is my life work. It's my career. That's why I had to wait so long to register, because in the nonprofit world, very few get paid a lot and very few have any bennies when they retire.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And did you come across Poder of Idaho, or is this an organization that you helped start up, or just happened to be join?
Actually, what happened was when DACA came out in 2016, I was already interested in immigration and assisting immigrants with their paperwork and filing applications to immigration, because it's such a complex department, I should call it, to submit any type of paperwork. It's just super complex, and anything can kick back your application. So in 2016, when DACA was in how would you say, it was being sent to courts. They were blocking DACA. We felt like they were going to do away with the program. Some young ladies organized a rally, and Poder of Idaho became, due to this 2016 fear, right? That administration came in, they wanted to abolish DACA. So there was a rally, and there was hundreds of people, hundreds at the Capitol. And so Estefania, who's the executive director of Poder of Idaho, was part of that organization. And she was speaking, and I just happened to be there because, of course, it was a rally. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to fight for immigrant rights, and especially for these DACA students. And I heard her speak, and she was fire. And she reminded me so much of myself at 20. So I said, God, I got to meet this young lady. So I made it my point to get to know her and a few of the other young people involved with Poder. And then it kind of dwindled after 2016, 2018. And then about 4 years ago, Stefania decided to step away from her job with another nonprofit and immerse herself with Poder of Idaho. And she asked me to come on as a board member. And Ruby Mendez Mota is the co-director for Poder of Idaho. They approached me. They said, hey, we want you to look over our 10-year plan. Can you help us with your leadership, because you've been doing this for so long? And I said, absolutely. I would love to come be on your board and help you through this process. And so we met at a little restaurant bar place in Nampa, and we went through the 10-year plan. And I kind of, you know what red check is? Like when a teacher goes through and red marks everything that's wrong, right? So I did that with that plan. And I said, you girls have already reached a lot of these um, goals that you had. So I think that we need to revise your plan and we need to look at the now. And so that's how I became involved with Poder. And I was pretty excited about them. And in fact, that day after that meeting, I put on my social media, hey, remember this name. As I just left this meeting, remember this name. It's going to be a powerful name in the state of Idaho.
How have you seen it then grow from when you first started to where it is today? Has
Oh
it
my
like grown
goodness.
tremendously? Like, do you have multiple offices? Do you have more people actually being activists in some of your rallies or your gatherings? Because I know you're trying to reach over here into Oregon, since we do border right next to each other
Right,
between
right,
Boise area, Treasure Valley, and
right.
Ontario. Um, so how was it from back then when you first initiated saying go red checking everything to where you are today?
Um, Honestly, we actually have an office space. Before we were all just kind of working from home. We have and we worked for a little bit at the what used to be the Cultural Center here in Nampa, the Hispanic Cultural Center, and we decided that we had come far enough to get an office space. So we have an office downtown Nampa. Right now, at one point there was like 5 of us working, but right now we have a gal that went on medical leave, and then our part-time social media person got a full-time job. And so Rosalind is our admin assistant. So she's kind of rolled over to taking on the social media for us. I do anything and everything I need to do, and Steph is still the executive director, which she concentrates on our grants and and bringing in grants to our organization. But from the time that we started to the time where we are now, we have grown immensely, like in funding and in the work that we do, our partnerships, our networking. So it surprises me that you had heard of Poder of Idaho, but we have like a $10,000 following in our social medias, a little over 10,000. We started out with a 600 member base. So we've really grown in all aspects. We always looking for volunteer opportunities. We do fundraising opportunities now compared to those 4 years ago when we sat together and looked at the plan. I want to say we brought a lot of spirituality into our organization, and we stay very cultural. Super important to us as we grow the organization that we don't bring in colonizer ideas into our organization. We want to be separate from that kind of, we don't want to be pigeonholed, right? So policies in a lot of these agencies and organizations and businesses are not culturally sensitive to our people. And so I don't know with you, but with us or in my family, and I see it in our community, that your next door neighbor that grew up with your mother's best friend becomes your tia, and we become very extended family, right? We marry, and my sister married somebody, and my brother-in-law's all their family has now become extended family, right? And so we want to be very conscious of being sensitive to our beliefs and how we believe and how we embrace community. And so we have brought that into the organization along with spirituality. We have an altar in our office. We light sage and incense every morning and a candle. And we're very want to make this organization or build our organization around our community.
It's amazing, especially in the topic of religion, especially nowadays, and considering how religion and spirituality is such a big key element in the Hispanic culture, in the Latino culture. And just thinking about that is, and trying to think of other organizations that kind of incorporate that or pay it due diligence. I can't think of very many that actually incorporate, just because it is such a kind of like a hot topic in today's times, where back in the day, everyone had some sort of denomination that they subscribe to, where today it's a little bit more intense. So it's definitely interesting hearing that you put that into somewhat of the focus of your organization, the spirituality aspect of it, because I think that definitely does go unseen in today's time. with, our cultural heritage and celebrating all the events that we do, and the lineage of how that was passed on from our great grandparents and their great grandparents and stuff like that. So that's an amazing thing to hear. I do love that. Um,
Yeah, we do depend a lot on our ancestral, like we look back and we do a lot of our work based on our ancestral beliefs, and we bring them into our space, our ancestors into our space.
Yeah, and I bet that makes it so much more welcoming for individuals to actually want to take part in some of the advocacy work that you guys do. Is your office open to the public to come in, and or is it just kind of like a working?
Oh no, no, it's absolutely anybody, that needs a space to work or whatever. Our office is open. We don't offer, I heard you say services. At this moment, we don't really offer services like direct
Mhm.
services. Because most of our work is in advocacy work, right? And
Yeah,
so we don't really have people coming in looking for like a food box or anything like
yeah,
that, right? But we do provide referrals. We sit and talk with people. We are going to have some charlas coming up, and that's like a workshop. It's just a talk in regards to parole in place. So just informing our community about parole in place, which was a new executive order that President Biden initiated in June 18th. So we do offer anybody that walks in, and if we can assist them, we will assist them. And if we need to refer them to another agency or an organization, we can do that. And we do get a lot of those. We do get a lot of that.
okay. So then, in terms of advocacy, I have here done my notes after like looking at your website that you focus a lot about immigration, economic justice, education, labor, and gender equity. If you don't mind, could you kind of like break down a little bit more in depth each one of those topics? I know we kind of covered the immigration stuff, but like in terms of economic justice, what does that even mean? What does that look like?
Okay. On economic justice, and we'll just go asking for
Yeah.
each section. Okay. So economic justice, we worked with the policy center of fiscal policy to bring earned income tax credit to the state of Idaho, so that everyone is eligible to get that extra tax credit when they do their taxes. So we look at, like, we want to fight for raising minimum wage, which Idaho has not raised in decades, right? Who can live on $7 an hour anymore? $7.25 an hour, right? So that is our focus when we talk about economic equity.
Okay. And now, how about in terms of like education? Then, what are you educating the community on?
So in education, we actually partner with ACLU, and we do workshops in called Know Your Rights. But a lot of people equate Know Your Rights to immigration, but this Know Your Rights is empowering parents to know their rights, to go into the school system and say, hey, I want my kids' grades. I want to talk to the superintendent. I want to be on the school board agenda. And so we work with ACLU presenting those workshops. And then I don't know if you heard about the Caldwell and the issue they had with the dress code and not allowing students to wear cultural, what they connected with culturally, right? T-shirts or clothing, and they were calling it gang attire. So we also worked with LULAC and ACLU, and just the community saying, hey, we're not going to allow this school district of Caldwell to demoralize our students by saying they are gang members when that's not their intent. They just want to be in touch culturally, right? With wearing a brown pride t-shirt or whatever. That it doesn't always equate gang member. So on education, that's what we do.
Okay. Wonderful. And I'll circle back to a couple of these that you mentioned, just because I'm just drawing down questions, but I don't want to interrupt you here
No, no,
because
that's fine.
learning quite a bit. So now moving on to like the last one I have here written, labor and gender equity. What does it mean by that?
Well, labor equity would be everyone needs to be treated the same. There's a lot of systemic racism in corporations, businesses. So we try to educate our families that they have rights in the workplace. The same with the gender equity. I mean, what Idaho is in regards to our LGBTQ plus community. There's no space for them. They're not welcomed here. And so when these policies were coming up in school districts where they were not offering separate bathrooms or separate rooms for people who recognize as an opposite sex, right? That they don't relate to the sex they were born with. And they're trying to like take that out of the school system or take that out of the state, absolutely squash it. And we're just saying we're not going to put up with that. That's not right. Everybody has rights in this United States of America, and we need to be treated humanely. We're looking at the humanity part of that and working with these marginalized communities to educate them in their rights and to stand up for them when we need to show up at legislation and say, this is not right. This is totally against our belief.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think you explained all those like super, super well, and I understand a bit. All of them are important. Which one in today's time do you see most people needing assistance with? Just because it definitely does change. 10 years ago, maybe, economic justice wasn't as much of a deal as it was for the labor equity, or maybe as it was for immigration. So what in today's time do you see more people needing assistance with?
Hot topic always will be immigration.
Yeah.
It'll always be at the top of the list, right? Until we can come up with a comprehensive immigration reform, or unless they start changing policies in the Department of Homeland Securities, where they really take a close look at old policies, old regulations, and change those things, immigration will always be top of the. They need our workers. They need us here, but yet they always trying to do a roadblock to not provide that service or provide that opportunity to become a legal permanent resident in the state, in the country, right? Parole in place is a perfect example right now that immediately 16 states, including Idaho, blocked and went to court to sue the United States Department of Homeland Security, saying that it was unconstitutional. And what they were trying to do is trying to get people legalized so that they could vote, which we all know undocumented or legal permanent residents or green card holders cannot vote. So immigration is always a hot topic. I think the second topic for us that I'm seeing is how the LGBTQ plus community is being treated, not just here in Idaho, but nationwide. Trying to stop pride events, stop them going in to read books to children and censoring books and those kind of things is just so radical. I feel like your household should make their own decisions if your child should get that book or not, and you shouldn't put that into the government's agenda to power us into doing what they want us to do.
Absolutely. So how do you guys handle that? Because historically and especially in the olden times, pride or expressing gender fluidity in the Hispanic culture was very much frowned upon, not discussed. You were excluded from the family. I've run into instances like that where my grandpa pretty much excluded one of my aunts because she came out as lesbian, and my grandpa's like, my daughter's dead to me. And that's something that I grew up with, and kind of being instilled in me is that that's not right, that's not okay. And it wasn't until I moved out and was able to think for myself, have my own personal life experience, to realize that that wasn't right. Grandpa was just wasn't being really thoughtful or considerate of anyone. So how do you tackle that issue in terms of the Hispanic population and their history with pride?
So I worked for the Democratic Party for a year. And so with the party's support, I had everybody said that last year's Canyon County Pride, or this year's Canyon County Pride was the first, but it was not. We had the first Latino Pride Fest at the Cultural Center. I did that. I created that event, brought people together. And that was something we talked about. Like, I feel like families aren't educated enough, our familias, and it's just generational. But I see the trend changing because of young people like yourself that are becoming more educated and understanding it better and standing up and saying that's, how I tell my family, no se pega. No se pega, eso no se pega. It's not contagious. No es contagioso. So it's just educating the older generation. And I think the younger generation is doing such a great job doing that, like standing up for their rights and saying, that's my friend. And I'm not gay just because I hang around with him, but they're human. And so they need to be treated with those same rights that I'm being treated with.
Yeah, so how then do you kind of just empower the youth to educate their parents, or is there ways that you try to educate the parents, and how do you go about that? Is it just through like these workshops that you offer, just referring them out to other resources, or just sharing
But we do
lived
like,
experiences?
yeah, when we have the conference, we always base our tracks on these, what our mission statement is, right? And so we work with providers that work directly with Latino communities, training them, explaining to them, having them understand how it is so unaccepted in our community because of the male machismo. But working mostly directly with the youth has been the ticket. And I see that almost right now in this era and in this movement, that the young people, our millennials and Gen Zers, are going to bring the change that this country needs.
Yeah, well said, well said. And now going to another one of the topics, so moving from the gender equity and going into the education, the what really caught my eye and what got my attention was when the two ladies, I forget their names again,
Anaí and Rosalind.
Anna and Rosalind, they did such an amazing job at an event that we had here in Ontario a month or two ago. But they were kind of describing what really grabbed my interest was some of the law education that you guys do, some of the legislation education that you do, because that is something that I was never taught. And it's only just recently when I've been, victim of discrimination, and I'll share my experience and why it was so impactful to me to hear some of the information that you guys had to offer and shared with me was because since I do live in Boise, Idaho, and I work in Ontario, Oregon, different policies around marijuana and smoking being legal, right? So I have to make that commute every day crossing borders. And there was one day in particular where I was pulled over. I don't think I did anything wrong. I wasn't speeding. I know that if I speed, my insurance bill goes up, and ain't nobody got time to be paying extra on insurance. So I knew I wasn't speeding. I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. I get pulled over. He says that I didn't engage my blinker on for long enough when I was changing lanes. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. I engaged my blinker, but whatever. That was besides the point. He then proceeds to ask me if I have anything on me. I'm like, no, I don't. He's like, are you sure you don't have anything on you? I'm like, no, I don't know what you're referring to. He's like, so if I were to search your car, I wouldn't find any weed. It's like, no. It's like, oh, so I can search your car right now? I'm like, no. Like what are you this like what's the reason for this? And so from that instance, being in that situation where if I had said yes, I would have been subject to let him do whatever he wanted. And then after that instance, it happened again, but even more aggressive to the term where they asked if they can bring a canine unit. And I'm like, and from there, I was like, why? I'm telling you no. And you're then imposing yourself on me when I'm telling you I haven't done anything. I don't have anything on me. I know the state laws. I know it's such a big deal. I'm not going to put myself at risk to your harassment. So when I heard about the stuff that you guys offer, I was like, that is absolutely amazing because people like myself, people who are have melanin in their skin, who look different than the average person, experience this at higher rates. So it really got me clicking and wanting to connect individuals that I work with, the houseless population, the families here in Ontario who happen to be pretty which Ontario happened to be a really strong Hispanic population, get them connected, get your guys' work around that area out there to them. So can you elaborate more on some of the education in terms of what goes on in these educations, what people are going to learn from them? How do we get connected to you to learn this type of stuff regarding, legislative laws, local police laws, and states?
Honestly, a lot of our work comes what we would call um, putting out a fire. If something comes up that we realize is danger to our community, we drop everything we're doing and we concentrate on that. And that I'm glad you brought that up, because racial profiling has been in existence forever, forever. And it has grown since Oregon has legalized marijuana, right? And people, we have family in Ontario. We have events in Ontario. I still have my friends in Ontario. That doesn't mean, and I think what you brought up was a really good point, and that's something maybe we need to bring in some attorneys and do a whole event around that. What are your rights coming from Ontario into Idaho if you get pulled over for some stupid reason, which they have every right. But unless they have a suspicion, or what do they call it, probable cause, you have every right to say, am I detained or am I under arrest, and may I leave now? That's it. You don't have to, and they get argumentative. They try to push your buttons. And I think from my own experience, I also have faced racial profiling, and I try to stay as calm as can be, but it's really hard to stay calm. And I think that's what they want. They want you to become aggressive. They want to be able to find a reason to arrest you so they can have that probable cause to go through your car. So I would love to partner with someone to bring that education to Oregon, actually, because you are the ones that are traveling here. Over here is Costco. Over here is the Treasure Valley Marketplace, the mall, the things we shop at that Ontario doesn't have. Ontario has grown. I've been there, and it has grown, but it's still lacking in a lot of retail and things, the Vilas and the things that our family wants to do, restaurants, those kinds of things, right? And so that would just be like, now you got my mind going like 100 miles an hour.
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, and I think that would be wonderful. And they talked about like that's something that they could do. And I know, like, luckily for me, I am bilingual, so I can speak English, but I can also imagine individuals who don't speak English or are not well fluent in English. What happens in those instances when they're trying to talk to the officer who's giving the commands and there's a language barrier? How do those people feel empowered to feel safe in their vehicle, to be able to communicate properly, to make sure that their rights as a United States citizen, as a human, aren't being violated? I know, again, another personal story that's why it's such a really important thing to me is my dad lived here forever, still doesn't know any English. It's so hard for him to learn it, and so he hasn't gotten it down. His English is extremely broken. I remember he was pulled over once. He was having a terrible day where he literally had to tell the officer, drive home, drive home, drive home, trying to convey to the officer to drive home with him so that my mom could translate what was happening, because my dad was already in a terrible mood. And he's like, this is just going to go way, way worse. So for like people like him who don't speak any English, but are still US citizens, still have the rights that all of us have, to be able to share with them what they can and cannot do, what rights they have, and the officers should follow by.
Well, everyone has a right not to speak, not to answer their questions. Let them arrest you, and then you need to turn around and sue the hell out of them, right? But unfortunately, our law enforcement wield the power here. Even if we speak fluent English, they wield the power. And they're going to figure out a way, if it's their intent, to either ticket you, arrest you, or detain you forever, how long, they don't care, right? I think what you've brought up as a great opportunity for not only Poder, because I've worked with not Oregon Human Development, but the Oregon Legal, it's like Oregon Legal Aid, but I can't think of their name right now. Maria Ramos is my very, very good friend. Not Maria Ramos, Maria. Oh, good Lord. Can't even think of her name right now. But we're very good friends, and we've worked together on immigration issues together. I would love to partner with them because it's not something that's taught. People don't know. We teach immigrant, undocumented people like what they need to do if they're pulled over. We actually give them a red card so that they can give it to the officer. Right? I have a right. I don't speak English. I have a right to stay silent. Those things, right? It's outlined for them, and all they have to do is hand the card over to the police officer. And I think that would be something that, like you said, we need to educate our families, at least to not give in to the aggravation that they're feeling, the aggression that they're feeling, to not make things worse for them, to answer the questions to the best of their ability. That would be, like I said, you got my brain working 100 miles an hour now, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to do that. And that's what I'm saying. This is how our work comes about. Like, people are complaining, people are coming to saying, this is happening to me. Then we figure out who's either doing that work so we can partner with them, or we do the work ourselves.
Absolutely. And I would volunteer myself to help out in any way for that. If you need some place to host a session, to spread outreach for an event, I know for myself, I would love to partner with y'all and get this started for our community, especially in terms around the houseless population, in terms of the Hispanic population here in Ontario, Malheur County. So I would definitely love to start working on something like that, because it is super beneficial for a lot of our community who face injustices simply by the language barrier, simply by the color of their skin. So we kind of been discussing some of like the needs and the reasons for some of these programs. Through these programs and these advocacy works that you've done, what successes have you seen through these efforts of yours? So what movements have you tried to fight for that actually went through, or what personal lived experiences have you heard from the community that your organization has done for them?
Well, actually, the young people that we've hired to work here with us they personally will say, I have grown so much here. I have learned so much. I didn't know I could do this. And I feel like we've really empowered our young people. In regards to, what was your other question? Oh, what was our successes? So we did Manejando Sin Miedo. I don't know if you heard of that, driver's license for all. Oregon has it. Oregon, Washington, California, Utah, and Nevada offer driver's license to the undocumented community. So for 2 decades, we have fought for driver's license in the state of Idaho. It's never even made it to a hearing. It's always just put in the round file. Last February, it'll be a year, yeah. Or it was a year. We were able to get that bill heard in committee, and we were able to get that bill out of committee, and it was going to go over to the House. But the House said to the Senate, we're not going to hear it, so don't bring it. But for us, that was a victory. That was a victory because it had never even been heard in committee, the Transportation Committee, and it made it through committee. It was voted on to bring to the floor for debate, for a hearing, and the House shot it down, right? But that for us was a big victory. Last year, there was like 8 or 10 anti-immigrant bills. One was a state-mandated E-Verify. And E-Verify is where you go to apply for a job and they automatically run your social security card or your LPR card through the federal database to see if you're legally or lawfully to work in the United States. And they were going to make a mandated that. So every mom and pop shop, every person that had a business in Idaho that's licensed through the state of Idaho would have to have E-Verify. And if you hired someone knowingly that they were undocumented or not eligible to work or lawful to work in the state of Idaho, you would be fined and you would lose your licenses. And so we fought that and we won. That's a victory. To say that it won't come back up, it's going to come back up. We work with Idaho Voices for Children, and we killed the Medicaid. We have Medicaid expansion in Idaho. They wanted to not allow undocumented pregnant women to have health care past pregnant after birth, right? They weren't wanting to extend it. And we also had people go testify. We worked with Idaho Voices, and that bill was killed also. So we've had some really good victories.
The reason I asked that, and I try to find this out with all these other organizations that I either partner with, or even if I haven't done like an interview with them, is just it's motivating to see that something is happening rather than just keep hearing like, oh, they say they're doing this and nothing ever happens. It's really demoralizing for individuals to be able to share some of your successes, to hopefully inspire individuals, to show them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, so to say, and to motivate individuals that these are just steps that are going to eventually lead to the end goal. So that's amazing. In terms of other projects, what else are you guys currently doing or trying to push for?
Right now we are playing the get ahead. We are going on the offense instead of always being on the defense. So these next 3 months, October, November, and December, we'll be preparing and rounding our groups up and uh, educating the community and being prepared. We're going to own the media this year about all these anti-immigrant bills that will be coming up. So we're ahead of the game. We're going to do a signature drive so that when these anti-immigrant bills come up, like the e-verify and the no health extension for an undocumented community, these kind of bills come up, we can present these signatures saying our community is totally against this bill. We will have all of that in place. We will have our sound bites ready. We will have our media releases ready. We're going to be prepared to face what the legislation brings to us this year in Idaho.
Okay, and you said a key part there in Idaho. And if you don't have like a sort of plan yet, that's totally fine. But since you had people here in Ontario for outreach events, is there any future for Oregon in terms of having a Poder de Oregon, or just expanding your guys' work area to
That is
either the border side, and what does that look like for members of Oregon who also have these problems,
right.
that not super similar to Idaho because very two completely different states, but you know, there's still advocacy work that needs to be done in rural settings.
Oh, and absolutely, because Eastern Oregon is a way apart from the rest of Oregon. Eastern Oregon is very red because they border Idaho. So I would love to expand, and that is our goal, to expand, right? One thing that holds us back, because we're a grassroots organization, there's 2.5 people working, sometimes just one person, me, working full time because, life happens, right? But we are dependent a lot on private donors, organizations who want to partner with us and give us funding, fundraisers, philanthropists. We're dependent on them to bring our funding in. So our expansion is what we want to have, but it would be very dependent on what kind of funding we receive throughout the future and throughout the year to be able to do those things. I would love to go into there. Not saying that we couldn't go in and do advocacy work there. There's no reason why we couldn't, right? When we were doing these outreach events, because I went to a couple in Nissa and then we sent the girls, it was because a lot of Payette, Weiser, Fruitland families go into Ontario to their events. It's easier to go there than come all the way to Nampa, Caldwell, or Boise, Meridian. And so we wanted to capture those voters that were eligible to register that live in Idaho but frequent Oregon to do their shopping, to attend church, to attend events. And that was our goal, to try it, because those are Payette, Weiser, Fruitland. Those are very remote towns next to Caldwell, right? It's 45 minutes for me to drive to Weiser. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we wanted to ensure that we had an opportunity for eligible voters to register to vote. And that's why we were there. But I am not opposed. And I mean, we have team meeting tomorrow. I would love to bring all this up tomorrow, which I plan to. Like, I am not opposed. If somebody asked us to come in and do a workshop, we would definitely be there.
Okay, that's what I love to hear is the willingly and want to extend your arm in terms of support and advocacy, especially because rural towns go left unnoticed for so long. A lot of like the issues people say, oh, that's just a big city issue. That's a big, but they forget about the little guys, the people who have all the agricultural workers that provide all the food for the families and the communities who provide all these jobs that go go unseen. So that's really, really amazing. And you mentioned workshops. I do want to hit back on that. What workshops do you currently have planned in the near future that people can, look into, possibly save the date to attend? What's happening?
At this point, because October, November, December is our time to regroup and prepare for the legislative session that starts in January through March. Most of our concentrations that, and we'll do fundraisers. This is the time I'll do some fundraisers. So I would love to invite everyone. And your listeners, if they're in the area, close to the area, we will have a fundraiser October 12th. We'll be providing food. There'll be a DJ. It is $20 at the door, but there's going to be raffles that you can participate in. There's going to be other activities, right, to participate in. Adult beverages will be available to those of age to imbibe if they want to. We always feel like we put on a good party. So we'll have that in October. Then we'll have something in November for our young people that come back from college break for Thanksgiving break, and then we'll probably do something in December also, an ugly sweater party or something also for our college students that are back in the area to come and participate. But those are all fundraisers for us, and that's what we have. But then come January also, not only are we working on legislative session, then I'm working hard on putting our conference together where we get about 200 plus people attend our conference with over 35 vendors or informative booths available. And we bring in a keynote speaker, usually a nationally recognized keynote speaker.
Okay. Wow, yeah, everyone loves a good party, and so yeah, please, anyone who's listening and wants to help support or find out more, I encourage you all to check their website out online, which is, I believe it's poderofidaho.org.
Our website's not very active right now because we have been working on it and we're revamping it. So I would strongly suggest to follow us on Instagram or on Facebook, and it's Poder of Idaho. Just Google Poder of Idaho, and you'll find us on Instagram and Facebook. And then we have a TikTok coming, and we also have a YouTube channel where I talk to different people every Wednesday. And we talked about parole in place. We talked about what the suit was about parole in place. We talked about voter registration. Then this Wednesday will be about our charlas or our workshops coming up about parole in place, which Ontario can gladly come over to Caldwell to attend a parole in place because we have U.S. citizens mixed what we call mixed status relationships, U.S. citizens married to undocumented, right? And they probably hesitate. They heard there's a block or there's a temporary block on parole in place. So we're going to talk about parole in place. I'm willing to review their paperwork that they're wanting to submit. $580 is a lot of money, but this is the way to go as long as your spouse, undocumented spouse, has no criminal record, they've been here more than 10 years, they've been a good citizen, then this is the way for these families instead of waiting these years and years. Because I personally am in a mixed status marriage. We've been waiting 8 years for my husband to get even a consular visit. And so this is the way to go. Even though there's a block right now, you can still apply. They're not saying you can't apply. We can still apply and have those applications there. With immigration or USCIS, awaiting till this trial or this temporary block is lifted, which two immigrant groups have filed I don't know what it's called. I have to look at my notes, but they filed in court to lift that stay. And they're wanting the judge to proceed on parole in place to allow people to continue to apply. But the best thing about parole in place, and I'll be talking about this at the workshops, is that once your spouse receives that parole in place visa, you can automatically what we call adjust status. And that means they can go automatically, don't have to leave the United States, don't have to go anywhere, just pay the fee. Will get their legal permanent residency card. So parole in place is a great advantage for those of us who've been married and waiting years and years to get our loved one documented. And there's no fear of going to their consular visit and finding out that they have to stay for 6 months or up to 2, 3 years waiting away from your families. So we're having those workshops. So I can't say we're having one in Caldwell, one in Nampa, and then I'm going to travel to Pocatello, because we also recognize in Idaho we have a lot of rural communities in eastern Idaho that don't receive information. So we'll start in Pocatello, go to Burley, and then to Twin Falls.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any of those upcoming ones, just so that way anyone can tune in. You said to check them out on Instagram or Facebook, where you guys are more active. So please, people, go look at their page, follow, be part of the movement, be a part of the advocacy work that they're doing, because it's great work. Some other questions I have here before I let you go, because I do want to respect your time, that I have is for individuals. Who come and see you, who face a bunch of barriers. Um, do you also run into individuals who have trauma in their life, and how do you help people dealing with trauma in terms of either racism, having traumatic experiences, being here, dealing with racism, traumatic experiences in terms of work, being mistreated, unfairly worked, not paid properly, stuff like that, just worker rights in general, or anything else in terms of like mental health, especially because that's again another topic similar to like pride, where we just don't talk about it. You deal with it, like you just pick yourself up and just keep going, forget about it. There's no such thing as depression, there's no such thing as anxiety, just get out.
Right.
So in terms of
That's a
that,
cultural thought process too. It's very cultural. Um,
yeah.
no estás loca, no necesitas terapia, right? But we do work closely with providers to where we could refer our families to. We're very big on therapy. We strongly recommend therapy. We do a lot of centering ourselves in the office. So we do have numerous Latinos, bilingual Latina uh, counselors that they could go to for assistance. In the face of like someone comes in with labor right issues, we do work with Human Rights Commission. And like I said, I've been here a long time, and that's why they call me La Abuela here, or the matriarch, because I've been doing this work for a long, long time. And so I've built a lot of relationships. So I have really good relationships with the Human Rights Commission, Department of Labor. I know I work with Wage and Labor there, Wage and Hour, actually, very closely with Marina Reynoso, who runs that department for the Department of Labor here in Caldwell. But I have access to so many different partners that we work with that I can just pick up the phone or send an email and say, I have this situation. How can you help me? We also work with what Rest Cooperative, and it's a group of attorneys that started their own 501c3 programs, and they also provide legal. And so we always turn to Richie and Rest Cooperative for guidance and also to refer families to them.
Okay, perfect. And then just this last question I have here. What is something that the public or the community should keep their eyes on that isn't necessarily being displayed? So kind of like things going under the table that we should be aware of in terms of, rights for Hispanic population, discrimination, discriminatory bills, stuff like that. What's kind of going under the table that we should be
Well,
looking out?
I think that whenever you feel like your civil rights have been violated or even you've been discriminated against, don't just go home and put it in your pocket. You should be verbal about it. You should be vocal about it. You have a right to seek justice, right? And that's what we're about, social justice. That's what we fight for. And if you feel, you could always reach out and tell us, this is what's happening to me. And or this is what happened to my compañero, or this is what's happening to my neighbor. Maybe it's not you in particular, but don't sit on it. Don't be fearful and not speak out or look for help or look for information, because it's available. We just as a culture have been programmed to mind our own business. And that's why I'm saying that the millennials and the Gen Zers and I don't know what the new title is for the 80s children, but the 86 and below are the 90s children. I'll have to look it up. But you young people are the change that's going to come to this nation, because you guys are being more educated, you're becoming more involved, you're staying within your cultural boundaries, like you're embracing your culture, but yet you're stepping away from these, what's the word I want to use? Disconnect, where we as a community have always said, calladita hasta te ves mejor, right? And so our young people are stepping away from that and saying, no, that's not right. I deserve better. I deserve an education. I deserve to be treated equally. I deserve to be treated with respect. And a lot of it's because you're becoming more educated, because social media has brought this to the forefront. And so young people are learning this through their social media accounts. And so I feel that the young people, again, and I don't know how many times I'll say it, I say it even here, millions of times, like the young people is the change that this nation needs. And so we need to focus on our young people. What do they need from us? What do they need to help empower them? What do they need to help them move forward? They're empowered, but they don't know how to move forward. They don't know how to be an activist. They don't know how to do advocacy work. So that is something that we have been concentrating on and looking at also. So I think my advice would be, don't sit on it. Don't just let it bother you and fester in your mind. Find out who you can talk to about whatever it was that you feel was civil rights, racism, labor, education, right? So that would be my advice. Find out, look for somebody, ask, talk about it, but don't just sit on it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. And then just to close us out, do you have any other just final thoughts, projects, movements, just anything you want to depart on the audience?
I think what I want to leave with you guys to end this session, which is very important to me right now. Of course, we're a nonpartisan organization. We are not affiliated with any party, but I do feel strongly that Latinos need to vote. If you're eligible to vote, be the voice for those of us, for my husband, for my DACA students, for my families that are living in the dark. Be that voice, because that will bring the change that this country needs. And in order for us to bring change, the only way to do that is to vote.
Why, thank you so much. And I really do appreciate you, Raquel, for joining me and sharing the work that you do. And I'll say it once again, so that way people do it, is check them out online on Instagram, Facebook, get connected with them, find out about any of their upcoming projects or fundraisers that's happening. Like you
also
mentioned.
have a newsletter, Amador, I'm sorry. We also have a newsletter that they can sign up for, and it comes out weekly. And then, like I said, we have our YouTube. It's Pláticas con Poder, and we bring information on our YouTubes every Wednesday morning. They come out.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so everyone, please do that. Thank you so much for spending the time with me. I really did appreciate it, and I really did learn a lot from you in terms of what it is that you offer as a whole, as an organization. So with that, everyone, thank you for listening. This has been a podcast by Eastern Oregon Center for Independent Living. And as we close out today's episode, a huge thank you to all of you listening and tuning in to today's episode. It really does mean a lot. If you'd like to know more about the services and programs that EOCIL has to offer, I encourage everyone to check us out online at www.eocil.org or interact and visit us on any one of our various social media platforms, whether that be Facebook or Instagram. Likewise, as mentioned throughout this podcast, if you'd like to know more about the advocacy work that Poder of Idaho has to offer, they mention to check them out on their social medias, where you can find them at Poder of Idaho. With that being said, thank you, everyone. This has been Voices in Action.